For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Marcus Chan. Marcus is the founder and CEO of Vanilla Consulting Group. During my conversation, Marcus shares some practical advice on how to build a sales organization. He also shares the knowledge and wisdom he acquired from being in some of the biggest enterprise sales organizations in the world, and how he was able to take that knowledge and package it up into a sales training program. So stay tuned for my conversation with Marcus.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Marcus, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Most certainly, every entrepreneur has a journey, right? They all go through a journey of how they, whatever the obstacles they overcame to become an entrepreneur. Can you share a little bit about your journey of how you became an entrepreneur?
Yeah, what's really funny is, when you and I chatted before, we're both, children of immigrants, right? So my parents were entrepreneurs, growing up, but they had like a little Chinese restaurant. They had some rental properties, and growing up, we were really, really poor. And I saw how hard it was building a business, working 80 hours a week in a restaurant, basically making pennies. And what's funny is, for me, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never did. I saw that, I'm like, no way. I'm gonna go get a corporate job somewhere. I want to wear a shirt and tie. I don't want to work in the back of a restaurant anymore. I don't want to work in a restaurant. I don't want to deal with that. I want to be able to utilize my brain to make money, if you will, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll get a corporate job. And my parents wanted me to be a doctor, a lawyer, etc., which I didn't do any of those things. And I went into B2B sales. So, and I stumbled into it. Was really, really awful. Wasn't even sure if that's what I wanted to do, but I just did it because it seemed like a good opportunity, and was really fortunate to have success. And I was really fortunate to have success over, quite a long time. And for about 8 or 9 years, I was just doing my thing, climbing the corporate ladder. I even changed companies, was running bigger teams, was winning awards, going on awards. Life was just great, making great income. Life was really good. I had felt no urge, no need to become an entrepreneur. And even at that time, it was becoming very popular, right? Everyone's like, be an entrepreneur, you see like these rental Lamborghinis, and people are trying to showcase how it's so cool. For me, I'm like, no, I'm good. I love what I do. I got a big team. It's awesome. Great influence. And, about 2015 or so, I had a lot of people say to me, hey, Marcus, you've been able to achieve some pretty neat things in just corporate life, from promotions and results and who you become. You should write a book. And I'm like, on what? Who would read my stupid book that I would write? So I'm like, oh, whatever. So I'm like, okay, I'll write a book. So I wrote one book, which is a common question I kept asking was, hey, people kept saying, hey, you got promoted 10 times in 10 years. How did you do that? How did you get promoted in these massive companies 10 times? I'm like, okay. So I wrote an ebook to do that. I didn't want to do any hard copy. I didn't want to do any shipping. So I wrote an ebook, and I started selling that online. I figured out how to do it online, and started selling some copies. Nothing crazy, $9 an ebook via PayPal. And it's all manually doing it. And people bought it. Mm-hmm. And that was that's really interesting. I just monetized my advice. And I'm like, okay, maybe make some side income, because I'm like, it's really hard to leave a high-paying corporate job for $9 an ebook. It's just it's not smart, right? Mm-hmm. So as I started kind of delving into this world of internet marketing and learning about digital products and assets, I came across digital courses. And now today they're all the rage, but at the time it was still relatively a newish thing. So I'm like, you know what? If I could digitize more of what I have in my head right here, I could scale that, right? I could scale that. But I'm like, but what am I going to do it on? Am I going to do it on career development? Am I going to do it on personal development, which I was really passionate about? But then I'm like, you know what? What? I started paying attention. What do people ask me the most questions on? And there was 2 buckets. Number one, they were sales questions. And number 2, they were leadership questions. Makes sense, because I was leading a sales org of 110 employees. So made sense. So I'm like, what if I could build a program to teach basically the version of me when I first started in sales, who didn't know what I was doing and needed something step by step for every single part of the sales process. Because I looked in the market, there was not a comprehensive step-by-step program for B2B sales. There was piecemeal things, like there was like, hey, here's a Netflix of sales, right? The mixture of things, right? And there are some really popular, like Grant Cardone, et cetera. But those are like guys who sold in car dealerships, like selling consumers. I need something for B2B, so I'm like, I'm gonna go and build something. So it took me about 2 years, and I was traveling nonstop. So for my work, I mean, I was working 80 plus hours a week on planes and hotels, at least 100 nights a year. So in my free time, I would build this digital program. Building the material, creating the content, filming, recording, and learning how to do all these things. I didn't know how to do any of these things. And it took me 2 years to do it. 2 years. And after 2 years, Samuel, I was like, what if nobody buys it? What if I just wasted 2 years? I'm like, oh man, what have I done? It's what kind of I thought. So I did a really soft launch a couple years ago. Did a soft launch, woke up and made $2,000 overnight. My head exploded. I'm like, oh wow, 2 people bought my program. I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, I can scale this, right? And at that moment, like the first $9 ebook was like a little seed that I planted in my mind of being an entrepreneur, That just dumped a bunch of fertilizer on it. I'm like, oh, wow. And at that point, I also realized, and my job it was still a very hard job, but at that point, I mean, I was top leader. I was absolutely crushing it. I'm like, like my next move is to be a VP now of a Fortune 500 company. Do I even want to do that now? Like, what did I really want to do? And I knew for me, I wanted to serve at a higher level. And in order for me to serve at a higher level, to serve more people outside of people in my sales org, the only way was to do it with nothing holding me back. And that meant becoming a full-time entrepreneur, because I was like a wantrepreneur is what it was. I was like partially, I wasn't all in. I was doing a little bit. So, but also you have to be smart, right? You can't just quit your job, especially when you're at that level and your income is phenomenal. Like you can't just leave it. So I was really strategic. So, I planned out, right, at that time. I'm like, you know what, this coming year, this is early 2019. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to plan this out. I'm like, I have a bunch of stock that's going to vest, because you have golden handcuffs and that type of stock is going to vest in the summer. I want to make sure I capture all those. Anything else past that doesn't going to vest, 1, 2, 3 years out, it is what it is. It's a loss. I'm like, I don't want to wait around anymore. I'm like, I'm going to wait for those to vest. I also had an awards trip in that August. It was free award trip because I was one of the top leaders. I'm like, I want to go on a free trip. It's a 5-star resort. I want that. And then I also knew there'd be an earnings call the 3rd week of September, which would drive the stock up. So the time to cash out would be not in the summertime, but to wait till obviously the earnings call, happens. So I literally wait till all those things happen, got my stock, waited for it to, got the vesting done, got the PC trip as we call it, and then I waited for the earnings call. And then September 19th, 2019, I quit my job and launched my business. And I've been going now for just over a year now. It's been an incredible journey. There's challenges like anything else, right? Yeah. But it's been an incredibly rewarding first year. I had some massive goals I wanted to hit. I didn't hit them, but I'm still really proud of the progress we made in my first year. And I cannot wait for year 2 and beyond, because I know as long as I continue to put the work in, the momentum is going to continue to build for a greater future where I can continue to serve at a higher level to more people across the world. That's my long answer to your question.
Yeah, most certainly. And I mean, congratulations on your first year. And it's got to be the most eventful year to even be as an entrepreneur, right? Who would have thought, mid this year, we're going to be faced with such big obstacles.
Right. Is what it is though, right? So exactly. I mean, this is how I think about it, right? Especially as in entrepreneurship. It's so there's a movie called The Martian with Matt Damon in there, and in that movie he goes to Mars, okay? And one of the things is, when he's on Mars by himself, he's got nonstop problems, right? Things break, there's always issues, right? But one of the quotes he talks about is at the end of the day, when you have one problem, solve that problem, and after you solve that problem, inevitably you will have another problem pop up. Solve that problem. And then after you have another problem pop up, solve that problem. And eventually, if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. And as an entrepreneur, it's no different for us. Eventually, if we solve enough problems, We'll build the life that we're going after. We'll achieve the goals we're going after as long as we continue to solve those problems, just like Matt Damon said.
That's so true. It's a good analogy there. So what's the one big lesson you learned in the process of building your business?
There's so many lessons. I mean, there's like little lessons here and there about certain tech to use and whatnot. But I think one of the things I think I made a huge mistake on, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, simply because I'm in the education business, right? I've always had a coach, some sort of mentor, right? And I've always invested into those type of programs before. And I had already invested into a program that helped me build out what I thought my business was going to be like, right? And then I was definitely doing it. And I was still building the business. It was still building nicely, but it wasn't going to the speed I wanted. So that's when I decided to invest into another larger group, another larger program that was going to take me to the next level, right? And that has been phenomenal for my business. I mean, literally, I earned back my investment very, very quickly. Within a few weeks, I earned back my investment, and then it's been nonstop ever since. And it's exploded now. And I wish I didn't wait so long to do that, right? Because I'm a firm believer, in my space, in the coaching education space, I don't trust a coach who doesn't have a coach. Like, we all need coaches. Kobe Bryant had a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. The best of the best, LeBron has a coach. Every top person has a coach, right? So I wish, my mistake was not doing that sooner, right? Because if I'd done that, I think back in September, I can't imagine where my business would be today. And I waited too long. And I definitely was making progress, doing all these things, but you don't know what you don't know. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And I waited until March. And I thought about it because I wasn't aware of my coach then. I thought about it. But I'm like, well, I'm actually making pretty good progress. Like I would not be surprised. One little tweak is going to be like boom, right? But being able to reframe certain things really helped me better improve my business overall, how I run, and deliver a better experience for my current clients too. So that was all really, really relevant, and I wish I did it sooner.
Yeah, most certainly. And what is your compelling reason why? What keeps you motivated to keep going?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think for the longest time, like most people, we drive towards means goals versus ends goals, right? So for example, for the longest time, my goal was like, I'm going to be an exec in a Fortune 500 company. I want to make this income. I want to do this. But really, when you think about it, that's a means goal. Because once you hit that, you said another one. Your end goals are usually different. Like, hey, look, I have freedom of time, do whatever I want, right? Once I became clear with that, I realized my true why broke out into three things, right? In these three simple words. Once I figured this out, this was a few years ago, it changed what I want to do really with everything in my life. From how I served even when I was in corporate America to how I serve today, right? It was to, number one, I wanted to leave behind a legacy. So if I died right now, I'll be able to say, wow, that dude's a freaking legacy. Look at what he's built. Look at what he's created. Look at that, right? Number two is the influence. And I'm not talking about being an influencer, but more of the impact of being able to impact people to become the best version of themselves, right? To say, hey, listen, whether they are a client or not, maybe they read a post, maybe they watched a video, they say, wow, because of Marcus, I made this tweak that changed my life, how I perceive things, right? That's really important to me, right? And that's why whoever I talk to, I always want to serve and help other people, right? And so it's not uncommon when someone says, hey, let's jump on a Zoom call, and my time's super limited, but if I do it, if we're on the call and it's about something totally random, I will help them. It's not uncommon. They'll tell me, how can I pay you back? I'm like, I'm good. I'm good because I just served you today. You already paid me back, right? And then number three would be love, meaning people know whatever I do with care and love. It's 100% being intentional. It's mindful in the moment, right? I don't just do it to do it. I do it because I care. Like, that's why I don't like sloppy work, right? Because if I do sloppy work, that's a reflection of me. It shows I didn't put my love and care into it, right? It goes against my values. But when I put my love and care into it, it's gonna be a high quality product or offer or service to whomever is receiving that. So those three things are what drive me every single day to be able to give to put my best foot forward for anyone and everyone.
It's awesome that you have some very concrete reasoning behind what keeps you motivated. And I know we touched on earlier, you talked about that you have a personal coach that you invest into, having someone coach you and so you can become better. So personal development seems like a very important priority for you. So in terms of kind of advices that you heard, can you think of like one bad advice you received, whether during your career as a sales, personal sales leader, or even now as an entrepreneur?
Oh, in terms of what about bad advice have I received before?
Yeah, from someone, yes.
Yeah, well, so I mean, there's always bad advice out there, right? It's anything from how do you do this? How do you send an email? How do you, make a cold call? How do you do X, right?
Mhm.
And the thing is, I'm gonna give you a reverse, right? Because here's the thing. Um, I learned this a long time ago, and this really helped me. But I don't take advice from people who have not achieved what I want to achieve consistently. So if they give me advice, if they're not where I expect them to be at, I block it out. Like that's why I can't even think of the bad advice. I'm like, mm, I don't know, because I literally have blocked it out. Because to me, it's like this. If I have a personal trainer, if they are out of shape, I do not want them as a personal trainer. I want someone who's practicing what they're doing. If someone comes to me and says, "Hey, Marcus, I want to be your financial advisor," the first thing this happens all the time. I say, "Great, no problem. Send me your portfolio. If your net worth is triple mine, if not quadruple, I will have a conversation with you. If it's less, I will not talk to you because I don't want to work with someone who has not achieved what I want to achieve." Right? It's kind of
Most
like
definitely.
if I want investing advice, man, Warren Buffett's a guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, not Joe Schmo, right? If I want marriage advice, okay, I'm not going to talk to the person. No offense to anyone out there's been divorced, no judgments there. But if someone's been divorced 5 times and they want to give me marriage advice, I don't know if I want to listen to them. I much
Yeah.
rather listen to my in-laws who've been married for 40 years. They have thrived through thick and thin. I want to hear from them. From my parents, 35 years, they can tell me how did like when you have tough days, how did you make it? How did you push through? That's what I want to know about, right? So I think it's important for anyone out there. You will get bad advice in life, but you have to protect your mind and your time as much as possible. And your mind is the most valuable thing because there's so much bad advice out there. You should only take it from people that have consistently achieved the thing that you want to achieve at all times. That's what you want to listen to. Take that advice, and it's even better for you.
Most certainly. I think it's a great advice because there's a lot of negative voice out there.
Yeah.
There's always like, oh, that won't work. This doesn't work. They as if they actually had like prior experience doing it, but we don't want advice from someone who hasn't tried or even had any prior experience doing it. That's a good recommendation.
Oh yeah, I'll give you one example. You just made me think of something, right? So, for example, I remember, at 21 years old, about to graduate college, and my parents, I had like five. I was really fortunate. I had 5 job offers on the table. The lowest paying one was an outside B2B sales job, 29,500 base salary for a startup division of enterprise rent a car, and it ranged all the way up to about $55,000, $60,000 for like some banks. I think they're like analyst roles, if I remember right, and there's a couple other roles in between. Well, I turned them all down. I wanted to go for the B2B sales role because I saw the potential for building a legacy, right? I wasn't called legacy back then. That's why I saw the opportunity. And my parents were very against it. They said, "Hey, Marcus, listen, um, you don't know any better. You're 21 years old. You should take this other job at the bank. It's stable, 55K a year. You're an analyst. It's going to be really good for you." And I told him, I'm like, "Hey, listen, though, for me, I can absorb the risk right now. Like for me, it's going in, learning B2B sales, building a business from scratch, and learning some really neat skills, which I believe is a great future in that company. So I think it's going to be the best fit for me." And I went against their advice, right? Their advice was to take the stable route. I went the unstable route, if you will, right? And it's funny because as I was really fortunate to have success, year after year after year, especially in that same company, I remember after about 4 or 5 years, they're like, "You're right." They're like, I mean, they never said that, but they accepted like, okay, now you're running teams, you built these multiple 7-figure businesses. Now you're having a lot of success despite the economy back then. And it was interesting is at that same time, I was looking to make a change again. I want to make a change in another company, 2011, and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold on! You just got married. You just got your MBA. You just bought a house. You're making great income. You've done phenomenal things in this company. Now you're going to leave that for what?" I'm like, "Well, this other company here, I see the opportunity. I see the opportunity where I could go from here." And they're like, "Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Right.
Mhm.
I made the jump anyways. Made the jump. Right.
Mhm.
And from there, it was a springboard in not just income and wealth, but really skill development. I mean, I learned so many skills that have paid off in dividends years later. I became better at sales, better at leadership, a better human being, better communicator by all the tough things I went through at that company, right?
Mhm.
And it really paid off. And it's interesting as I started to show my parents down, years after I made that transition, they're like, wow, they started to see, they're like,
Mhm.
okay. So when I told my parents I was making a leap into entrepreneurship, right? I'm like, hey, this is what I'm gonna do. They're like, like, what are you gonna do? I told them, they're like, we trust you now. Right? Now they trusted me, right? But the first two times, the advice they gave me was going against what I wanted because they wanted the safe route, right? But they've never done that type of risk, right? They never,
Emotionally, and
they,
sometimes it could
you know,
just be from your loved ones, and they have your best interest in mind, but
totally,
oftentimes, that advice isn't probably the best one for you. So you have to kind of decide for yourself, and that's
100%,
entrepreneurial journey, right? You kind of have to take the risk. um,
100%.
which which brings me to my next question about management and leadership. As entrepreneurs, I know we kind of always have this dichotomy. We're operating as a leader. We have to empower the team and get them fired up to move forward. Then we also need to operate as a manager because, especially as in the starting days, you kind of have to be between those two roles. Which one do you normally fall into automatically?
Yeah, I tell you what, right? So, right now I'm pretty fortunate. I run as a solopreneur, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna do as long as I can because obviously you can maximize all the profits you get as a solopreneur. But I've led teams for years, right? Even when I was building startups, and um, the reality is in order to scale, there definitely is a balance.
Mm-hmm.
You can't you, you like I remember going from having one or two reps, which even then when I first started, I struggled. I struggled like delegating and trusting and leading. I was a really bad leader at first. As a team got bigger to like 5 or 6 reps or employees, at different departments, you have to learn to relinquish a little bit, right? And you start learning how to develop some systems to be able to really scale. And it gets to a point where I got to a point where I had 20 employees and they're all reporting directly to me. So there's no layers in between. And I realized at that point I need to build even more systems in place to really scale results. And that's anything from hiring, training, onboarding to sales processes to operational processes to everything else. And then I went to a next level role where I had, at first 8 leaders, and each of them had, 8 to 12 employees. So now layers of layers. So I had to learn how to train leaders, right? And to lead them, which has become a very different skill. So, and it's really hard. It's when your org is that large at that point. At that point, it's like 80, 85 reps. It's really hard to keep your pulse on everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to build things in place that allow you to be anywhere and everywhere without working 100 hours a week. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy, right? But if you build systems in place, it's going to help you because if you do it right, then you can grow the team. So I grew those teams to 100. I grew to 30 plus additional employees on top of that, and we added more leaders. So I ended up having 11 leaders in more states. So we started spreading from there, and we can do it really effectively. It's really powerful. But again, it's like the bigger the org, the less control you have. like it's kind of like, oh, it sounds cool. You have all these employees, but every day it was like a kind of spinning plate, right? Like you have more spinning plates, right? Because especially if you have a pivotal role like a leader, if that leader does not work, that can bottleneck your business. It can really hurt you, right? So you have to become very keen. Like you develop new skills as a leader. You have to be able to really know how to hire, train, develop talent. That's a key skill. You can't hire, train, develop talent. You'll die
Mm-hmm.
because you need other people, right? You need other people to be able to build the rest of the business. People you can
Mm-hmm.
trust and count on. So you need all those systems for that as well. So really, everything becomes systemized as the bigger as you get. Like when you're running 4 reps, 5 reps, or 5 employees, you can control everything. It's super
Mm-hmm.
easy.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get to that level where you do even over 10 employees, you get to the point where you are not as effective. You simply are not as effective anymore. Like you become the bottleneck. You become the bottleneck to the business. I know I'm starting to bottleneck the business. I'm like, okay, this is not worth my time anymore. I need to start outsourcing this editing stuff. I don't want to waste time with this. Like anything that's worth less per hour than I should be paid. I shouldn't be doing, right? So now it's getting to that point of hiring people to do it, right? That I can pay $8 an hour, $10 an hour to take care of some of these non-essential tasks. Well, I focus on the big levers for the business, right? And that's for any entrepreneur. That's how they need to think, right? I think I'm really fortunate that because of my experience in working corporations, I've tasted that. I made the mistakes of not scaling properly, not hiring the right people, and that has impacted the growth of the business.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think it brings me to my question about, so when you're talking about, especially smaller organizations trying to build a sales organization, right? Yeah. And some organization will never get to a 50 or 100 sales team, member sales team, just by nature, they're not going to get there. Right. But especially for a smaller organization, when you're trying to build that, how would you how do you create a culture where you can actually have longevity in those reps, especially when they don't have that opportunity for growing up in that ladder? What would you do for that?
Yeah, so here's what's really interesting, right? I have hired, trained, developed literally hundreds of reps over the years. And it's interesting. It's like a lot of times what I find, for sure, you should have a good comp plan. There's some basic stuff, like you should have a good comp plan. Okay, like if you have a crappy comp plan, it's for salespeople, it's really hard to keep them incentivized. Okay, and typically, in general, most salespeople, like, they typically want to feel constantly developed, challenged, and they want to grow. That's if it's a good rep, they typically want that. So really, it first starts off with how you hire. Okay, it's the pure root of it is like, how do you hire? If you hire right, that can solve a lot of problems on the back end. If you hire wrong, it becomes a freaking nightmare trying to get rid of them. Okay, so number one, have a really good hiring process. That's the first thing, right? Multiple steps, vet them properly. Once they are in, make sure they're properly trained. Give them the tools and resources to be successful. A lot of times, many companies don't do that. So a rep will come in, and the founder, whoever, say, hey, here's a list, or hey, good luck. I need you to make X calls. I need you to go get some appointments to close some business. Or it's like if they have a good marketing system, they say, hey, here are these leads. Just call on them and book calls and close them. Some reps will be successful, most will not. Most will struggle, and they'll fizzle out after 3 to 6 months. Okay, the honeymoon of joining a new company has faded away, and it's completely gone. So that's why you have to have a good onboarding and training, so they feel not just good about the product, but they need to feel really good about improving their sales skills. Because here's the thing: whatever they sold before, even the last job or jobs before, they may have a sales process in place. They may not know how to take new product and stick it into what they already know. They may not know. And a lot of times top reps have zero idea on what makes them great. They're like, I think I'm likable. People like me. I work really hard. I make some calls and they just buy. I'm like, a little more complex than that. So most of them, they don't know. So give them good training development up front. Okay. Now, more importantly, you want to make sure, and just like it's for any employee, because I had employees in operations as well, you want to make sure they're constantly developed and nurtured. All right. So what that may mean is, for example, in general, many salespeople, whether they want to admit it or not, they want to be recognized for their behaviors and their results. Right. So if you have a weekly team meeting or sales meeting, they love to be recognized. Right. It's not about recognizing mediocrity, but recognizing the right types of things. Okay. So that's really important. They want to be trained consistently. So giving them that developmental training every single week is really important. All right. And that means like for me, right, it's a little different because, I was running a sales org, right? So my sales leaders, or me when I was a sales leader, like we had 2 meetings a week. Every Monday we had a sales meeting where I would recognize, redirect, highlight, and motivate, inspire in 45 minutes. And there's like accountability in there too. And there's role plays. I got them warmed up for the week. Wednesdays, I had a training meeting. We trained, we role played. It was like get them battle ready. We refined their skills. We put more tools in their tool belt. We sharpened their tools. So this way, here's the thing: most reps are not going to do it on their own. So I would make sure they did, right? And of course, you may need another meet depending on the skill level of the reps. So you constantly develop them. Okay. Now, over time, as they continue to have success, make sure you are still doing one-on-ones with them like every week. Really important, because here's the thing: as you and I both know, new business sales is the lifeblood of a company. It's It's the lifeblood. You need to have new business sales constantly, right? Obviously, take care of your current customer as the best clients to have, but you want new business blood at all times, constantly flowing in to make sure the wheels keep moving, right? So that new customer acquisition is very, very important. So you got to make sure that your reps, you're talking to them every single week, and you're debriefing them, having one-on-ones. And in those one-on-ones, it's not, hey, what'd you sell this past week? What's in your pipeline? It's more so removing obstacles, coaching for high performance. So you're constantly developing them, right? It's really important. So, and then you should have milestones. We can put some milestones in place. Maybe at 3 months, if they hit a certain milestone, you're doing something with them. Maybe you're taking them out to lunch. Maybe taking out to dinner with their spouse, and they got some milestones to hit, right? Maybe there's some promotional things. Sometimes it may seem silly, but sometimes even a change in title can really improve results. Now, it should not be an arbitrary change of title. It should not be like, oh, you've been here a year now. You are now a senior account executive. That's a waste of time and resources, right? But more so, it's like, hey, listen, once you hit this certain tier, whatever goals you have established, once you hit a certain tier, and then you'll get promoted to be a senior account executive, right? And you can do some other things too, right? Like, incentive programs such as trips, etc., right? So if they hit, let's say, for example, if the goal is for them, not cool, but the goal, like a big goal, like, hey, if they're going to do, say, 500 grand, it's great, and you want them to do 1 million. Hey, you do 1 million, here's your incentive trip for the year, right? You get to go to Europe 1 week, all expenses paid on me. Boom. Right, so that can be very rewarding. So that's something forward-looking to look forward to, right? But then again, on top of that, as they become more developed, you want to make sure you have ongoing development, whatever they're struggling with, right? Because, for example, like after a year, like if they're performing, they're good, and they're a really good rep, and you see them as a potential opportunity to be a great leader, and you don't really have the time to sit with them and train them. In addition to being a leader, it might be like, hey, listen, I found some courses over at so-and-so. It's a 1-day seminar for a John Maxwell leadership course. Like, I'd love to send you for a day for your development. What do you think? They would love that, right? So it's really powerful. And then give them also opportunities to be empowered and to lead as well. So if you're hiring new reps, hey, listen, one of your new responsibilities, I want you to spend an hour a week role playing with Johnny New Guy, right? Then they feel empowered. So again, give them opportunity to win, and also help with other parts of the business. So that's really key. Involve in the business, develop them, and when you do all these things in a really good way, and you show appreciation. Let me back up. There's a really good book it's by Paul Marciano called "Carrots Sticks Don't Work," and it talks about the respect model of leadership. And when you use the respect model for leadership, which is like recognition, empowerment, etc., when you do these things as part of it, you will lower your turnover and increase your engagement of employees, right? And by doing some of the things I mentioned here, and obviously it's not all about money, but it's about early development. You will see that happen. Like the org I took over, they were averaging like 40% turnover when I took over the large org. I reduced it to 15%. 15%, right, in 1 year for an 80 plus employee org, right? That didn't happen by accident, because I put things in place. I was very intentional. I'm like, I can't bleed out the back end with all these turnover costs if I don't plug that bucket and put systems in place to develop them. And when you do that, it's a long game. You may not see some results immediately, but it's a long game of doing the right things up front that will invest into your people, that will help them stay there for longer and maximize their potential. And of course, if there's developmental opportunities for them down the road, even or for like promotion, even better, right? And it might mean maybe in operations, maybe in other parts of the business. What else do they want to do? Maybe if you want to expand operations, maybe they're going to be a key leader in opening a new location in Denver. Who knows? So it's constantly thinking that way to keep them engaged. But the key is uncover what they want and help them get to their goals, and you'll see a lot of them will just stay as a result.
It's a great, yeah, very, very good answer. And I think the very fact that you explained, oftentimes, people just think, give more money is a great motivation, but it's really not the case. I like your idea of, taking them to a leadership conference, because that's actually really, you're showing that you want to invest into them, to have them really grow their skill, which is extremely important. Yeah, because that way they know you care about them as a person, and more than just company just making more money.
Oh yeah, I'll give you some examples, right? So so I scaled some of these things I did. I think you'll appreciate this. So one of the things I did every single, I mean, I would actually, like when they performed, we had a newsletter. I would write a nice note to them and send it to the office so they have it on their desk, right? But for every single rep that hit a certain qualifier for an award or a company prior, I used to send handwritten notes to the office. So they would get a handwritten note from me, and I would have probably 20, 30%, probably like 30% of my crew achieve it. So I would write literally 30 or so handwritten like cards, right? A real, not just sign, like a legit message, and send it to their office, right? So they got that personally from me. When I was a sales manager, right? When my org is, whether it's 6 to 20 employees, every single quarter, I wrote a handwritten note, or I typed it if it was gonna be long because my handwriting's terrible. I would type either a really nice note or handwrite, and I would mail it home to their spouse, not to them, to their spouse, right? And the reason the spouse is because if they're having a rough day, they can blame their spouse. But now the spouse has this letter from me. They got from me 4 times a year. That was directly to them and saying how awesome their husband or wife is. I would say, hey, listen, hey Samuel, your wife, so and so's doing so awesome. They achieved this and this. I'm so proud of them. Thank you for your support. Here's my direct cell number. If you have any questions, any concern, if you're unhappy, call me. Right? And I would do it every quarter. Right? And then of course, in addition to that, I had awards dinners, and I would see them every quarter as well. And I would spend all my time talking with the spouses, because I wanted to make sure that I endeared their hearts and their minds into who I am. And then they also get that letter as well. Super ninja, by the way, super ninja move, right? And then on top of that, as they would achieve success in awards, I would tell them, I'd say, hey, listen, as you achieve your goals, whether you make the money you want and you buy a new car, you buy a new house, you have a baby, you get married, you adopt a new kid, you give to charity, you spend more time with your family, whatever you do because of your success of working for me, send me a picture. I want to see what you're able to accomplish, the tangible picture of what you accomplished. It could be family time. I don't even care. Show me. So I'll collect all these pictures, okay? And every quarter, or so twice a year, I'll put together a gratitude newsletter. I'll take a newsletter, I'll put all their pictures inside, right? And I write a note to them and say, hey, listen, we had another blowout quarter. We're number 1 in the company again. Blah, blah, blah. That stuff is irrelevant. What is most relevant are all these pictures. This is what you are all doing as a result. So thank you so much for your dedication, your loyalty, your hard work, for giving your blood, sweat, and tears, for working for me in the company. I care about you all so much. Let's make this next quarter an absolute banger as well. Thanks for your loyalty. Boom. And they get this newsletter filled with their pictures. And then they, of course, it's printed out, it's mailed to them. They'll put it on their fridge. So now they have notes from me. They have a newsletter from me. They got pictures on there. It's like a Christmas card. You don't throw a Christmas card away. You put it up somewhere first. So it's super ninja move as well. So now I'm just in their family every single day. But again, now they know that I truly care. And because again, now one of my three big whys, love, is in there. So now they know I love and care. And that reduces turnover and drives performance to a deeper level than most can actually achieve. So I'm a little crazy like this, but I test all kinds of things. Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. I wish we had more time, and I want to be conscious of your time. Yeah. And we might even have to do a second episode if we don't wrap up here. I'm serious. Yeah. Because I do have a lot of other practical questions that I want to ask you. And one of the questions that I have is, obviously you're a king of sales training. You've done it a lot, right? We talked a lot about how you train them and do all those things. In terms of from your experience, especially when you're doing outbound and you're trying to generate new business for the companies, and you're trying to also teach your students about how to do it, what have you seen really work, especially for creating urgency from an outbound sales standpoint, that you would say that this is one of a tactic that that works really well?
Yeah. So so there's, depending on which approach or which medium you're going, if you will, right? So it's just say if you can do a straight cold call, okay? If it's a straight cold call, here's the reality, right? I mean, regardless whether it's cold call, email, DM, however you do the initial outreach, mailer, um, you are always fighting status quo.
Mhm.
Okay, status quo. There's going to be a bunch of little layered objections below that, like, pandemic, the election, not interested, have a vendor under contract, etc. Whatever. Boom. That's all the same. It just means that they're a status quo. That's the first thing to understand. So you're always fighting status quo. Um, is simply put, when you're making that cold call, it's a cold call. They know nothing about you, and even if you're a no-name brand, it does not matter.
Mhm.
Your number one goal is to book that appointment. So when you call, your goal should be within 20 to 30 seconds, you are booking that appointment. That should be your goal. That's very effective if you have that strategy. Okay, right? Like, it's not about it's just assuming it's going to happen, right? Like literally, if I'm calling someone, it's as simple as, hey Samuel, it's Marcus with Bentley Consulting. Thanks for taking my call. The reason I'm calling is I work with businesses just like yours, including A, B, and C, helping their sales team blow their quota out of water, especially during the pandemic. Let me show you exactly what I mean. How is Thursday at 8? That's the point. At that point, I'm gonna have objections, and my ability to overcome my objections determines if I get the appointment or not. Notice how fast I was. Like, how much time I spent there just saying that script. How long was that? Boom. I'm gonna get an objection anyways, so I'm not gonna pitch them. Like, all they need to know now is I just dropped some social proof. Oh, some of the businesses. Okay. Oh, and this is the benefit. Those are the results I want to achieve. Like, those are my struggles. So within 15, 20 seconds, you have now uncovered, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Right? So, and then we'll get objections. I'll handle every single objection. Right? That's the magic is the handling objections. Right? And then after you handle them, then you qualify. That's really key. Like, you got to keep going. Like, you have to mentally embrace you'll have 5 no's. Like, if I can get through 5 no's, I'm probably gonna get the appointment. So you got to be able to push through, right? And also, notice the urgency of my tone. My tone is urgent. Let's go. Let's move. It's you can hear the enthusiasm in my voice. That's part of how you create urgency on the phone. That's the first piece. Let's talk about DMs and emails. All right. The thing is, when you're doing DMs and emails, oftentimes the objection is no response. That's it. There's just no response. Like, you can't deal with a no response. The mistake many make, and I still see it to this day, is people obsess about sending sequences. Well, if I send them 7 emails in a row, they're going to be interested. Yeah, maybe. You're right. Like, yeah, maybe. But you also burn the other, like, 90, 95% of prospects, which are probably viable prospects. So don't do that, right? So instead, and everyone's trying to do that. Just, everyone's trying to do the same thing. Like, I have a 12 email sequence. Like, each one is a drip. It's going to really warm them up. Here's the reality. And I laugh when people say, "Oh, I have such a high open rate, etc." But I open lots of emails I don't care about. like on my iPhone, when I delete one, it goes to the next one and it opens it.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether I want to look at it or not. Okay? So that doesn't mean anything. So all I care about is the booking rate. So if it's an email or a DM, the strategy I find best is it should be short, brief, with a really soft call to action. Now, if you are a complete no-name and it's completely cold, which is usually it is, I usually recommend you provide something, and it should be personalized, by the way, as well. It should be personalized to them. And not, people say personalized to the persona. Yes, you can have personalized to the persona to a certain extent, but people still see through that. People still see through that. Right? Like, I'm like, people send me like, oh, they're like, you're a founder. Here's an email template of a founder. I'm like, yeah, I get that, but it's not me still. Right? So understand the persona is merely a template or framework that you might have, but you need something to personalize it more. And I like to provide value up front that I know will be high value for them. It's irresistible, completely free. And the reason I do that is, because I serve, right? When you get something of high value up front, they are more open to having a conversation. And it leads to a really easy follow-up. So for example, for an organization like yours, right? I'm going to imagine like, okay, they're probably struggling on the phones. I might send you an email that might sound, and it should sound like a human talking to human, you know? It might be like, hey, Samuel, I just saw your interview. You interviewed Marcus Chan. That guy is freaking dope. He's awesome. He's funny as hell. Something that's kind of different than catching. Oh, like cool. Clearly, like I love the question you asked about this. Now they know. Okay, I really did watch that video or do watch whatever. Hey, so speaking of that, I work with businesses to help them, sell more. Also, you know nothing about me, so here's this free 30-minute training. You can show your sales team that'll help them get a 70% callback rate on voicemails. Just check it out. Have a great day. Boom. The only call to action is like a really soft one. Now think about that. If you receive that email, would you be open
watch it?
You'd watch it.
Yeah, you would watch it.
And if it's really valuable and the people put it in action got results, wouldn't you be more open now to having a conversation with me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Certainly.
So now my next follow-up is it might be a phone call. I mean, I don't do initial cold email. I go right for the phones first, right? But you could call them next if you want to, or send them an email. Say, hey, what did you think about that training? Now we're having dialogue. Oh, haven't had a chance yet. Okay, no worries. Hey, check it out. Right? Hey, you know what? Here's also a PDF that highlights 7 tips to help you book more appointments during the pandemic. I think you probably read that too. Boom. Now more value again. So now like the first initial outreach is like value. They're like, I probably should talk to this person. So now like you will feel almost obligated now to have a conversation with me. So when I go for that, hey, listen, like if you saw value in this, it probably makes a lot of sense for us to get on a call. Would you be open to having a conversation so we can discuss how potentially we can partner up? Now we're open. Now, again, I still don't like the email thing because then you have to wait for them to respond. I prefer, again, to call, have a conversation, hear the objection, overcome it, deal with it, and go from there. Because in your mind, you might be like, well, we have Sandler training. I mean, I don't know. It might work. I think we're okay. I wouldn't know that if it was via email unless you told me. And then I have to rely on you reading my email back to deal with that object. I'd much rather call you and say, hey, listen, I just sent you these 2 things. You saw some value. Let's set up a time and let's dive deeper into your needs. If it makes sense, let's partner together. If not, no worries at all. How's Thursday day? Boom. Now that's how I'll do that. Okay. Now, you could also do the same thing in like LinkedIn. I actually prefer a video DM up front. So I get I connect with them, right? And if I have multiple touch points where maybe I like their post, comment on the post, share their post, engage with it, so they're kind of warmed up to me, view their profile, they might have noticed that as well as a part of a warm-up, right? That first DM to them, first off, when I send a connection request, it's blank, completely blank. The reason simply is this, is if you put text in there, most of the time it disqualifies you from getting accepted, unless it's so personalized to the point of, hey, hey, Samuel, saw your interview with so-and-so on this. That was really awesome. Want to connect, want to make sure I keep seeing your content. That's a little different. But most people aren't doing that level, so you're better off leaving it blank. When you leave it blank and someone sends you a connection request, they go through their head. It's kind of like when someone calls you on the phone, you answer, like, hey, it's Marcus. And you don't know who Marcus is, so what do you think? What do you start doing in your head?
Which Marcus?
You start thinking. And then if you can't figure it out, you're like, hey, Marcus, I'm sorry. How do we know each other? All right.
That's true.
So I just tap into your anxiety, okay? You have fear of missing out now. When I send you that blood connection request, it's the same human response. So now you accept it, right? More like your body needs to accept it faster. You don't know what's up still. You're like, whatever, it is what it is. And this is assuming you have an optimized profile, not spammy. Doesn't say use trade, binary or Forex or whatever. It's a clean profile. It looks well optimized. Then you'll accept it. And after you accept it, I would send you a video message. In that video message, it would be a very similar message to what I did earlier. And it might sound something like, and I break into 3 compartments or three buckets. I call it GDP, gratitude deposit personalized. Okay. So it sounds something like, Hey, Samuel, Marcus Chan here. Just want to say thank you so much for accepting my invite. It means a lot to me. I took a look at your profile. I love that the interview you did with so-and-so is super insightful. My big goal is to give massive value for, founders like you who have people on their sales team. So I actually put together a free 30-minute training, which I think will help your sales team book more appointments during this time. Check it out. I hope you enjoy it. Have a great day. See ya. Boom. So now you'll hopefully consume the content, right? Or have your team consume the content, and you will become more indoctrinated into learning about me, what I'm all about, trusting me, liking me more, seeing me as an expert in my field. Mm-hmm. And now anytime of follow-up, you're more likely to work with me, right? And have a conversation. So if you get really sophisticated, then you could obviously, they can consume the content and then the drip sequence that warms them up into a call. Right, so that you can do that as well. But now the point is again, that's in more of an expert mode. You're more open now. You're getting them to like and trust you, and frankly, no, you're not full of BS. That you actually can do what you say you're doing, and that's the first thing. As long as you do that, then you're totally gold. But those are the methods that I would do right now, which they are working very, very effectively for many of my students. I mean, I told this yesterday whenever we talked. I got an email for one of my from Dave, who has a sales team of 6 reps. Mm-hmm. Their team, who he hired right before the pandemic, 0 B2B sales experience. They are 300% to quota right now. They sell to small, medium-sized businesses, 300% quota, and they have a 0.7% defect rate, meaning less than 1% actually quit. They're retaining over 99% of the business as a result, right?
It's really nice
because they're actually using methods that actually work. They're actually connecting people, right? So a lot of times it's, your reps are right here. This is the goal they want. For people listening, they won't be able to see this. In between, there's a bunch of BS excuses that hold them back from achieving those goals. If you can remove those BS excuses, then they could see the goal and go after it, right? And it starts with making sure they're armed with the right tools, such as proper outreach, frameworks to get to those goals. So a little bit of a long answer, but that's how I approach cold outbound to get more appointments to ultimately close business and fill up a nice, massive pipeline.
Awesome, man. You are full of insights on a lot of practical advice. And I think we certainly need to do a part 2 of our interview, and I haven't even gotten through half of my questions. So I certainly appreciate you sparing this afternoon with me. And Marcus, you are just full of wealth and wisdom, and we'll certainly have links to your website and your resources on the show notes. So any parting wisdom for our audience?
Yeah, so last thing I'll say is, again, first off, thank you so much for having me on. Really, really appreciate it. And the advice I'll share is advice I shared a little bit earlier as a quick reminder. Only take advice from people who achieve what you want to achieve consistently, right? That's the last thing I'll say, because again, lots of people have tons of advice, but they have not achieved those results. Don't listen to them. It's just no different. I see a lot of sales trainers out there, a lot of BS advice that I know does not work. And when you look at the records, they don't have the success and track records. So follow people, listen to people who have done it. Listen to founders like you who have done it, right? And only when you do that are you most likely to be positioned to have massive success as well for yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marcus. Appreciate it.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.